And welcome in, everybody, wherever you are, however you may be listening. This is the Coach's Corner. And, of course, we have our coach in the house. Coach Bona, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great, Bo. How is your day going?
Going good. It's, Wednesdays are always crazy, right?
They really are. It's been a crazy work day. It's been we got National Signing Day going on across the nation. Trying to follow that a little bit on 24/7 just to see who's signing where, who's honoring their commitments, who's might be flipping and all that stuff. It's a busy week with college football, with the championship games going on this weekend, and then the transfer portal opening up on Monday the 9th. So just when you think things are winding down in college football, it really, it's actually gearing up. So a lot of, those guys are having to juggle a lot of things at this time.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy, especially, we were talking a little bit before about the limitation of the roster going forward. So you have your signing day and then the portal opens. You only get 105 spots. Like it seems like it's more competitive than it's ever been.
Oh, absolutely. Again, that 105 capping the rosters at 105 is going to be a major adjustment especially for your Power Four programs. I think a lot of your mid majors are probably working on rosters closer to that size. I mean, when I was at Central Michigan, I think we were topped out at. I think they maxed us out at 115 or 120, if my memory serves me correctly. But I mean, that's fewer opportunities. More probably scholarship numbers, but fewer opportunities for guys to actually suit up and play college football. It should help the lower divisions, like your FCS schools, your Division twos. That they should benefit from some of that trickle down, but it'll definitely be, it has everybody's attention across the landscape of college football, just in terms of how they're going to, how you manage your roster right now in this day and age of transfer portal, NIL, and now the reduction in roster spots. That's a major hurdle for everybody that everybody's going to have to overcome. But everybody's playing from the same deck of cards, so
that's true.
It is fair.
Have you heard if they are going to limit the amount of times the portal opens? Right, because the last couple of years it was open now, and then it opened after the spring game, and then it opened like leading into the season. Right, so if you were a coach right now, it'd be really hard to know who was even really going to be on your roster.
No, I agree. I think there's a lot of discussion, constant discussion about that in terms of what's the best formula. I think this time of year does make sense. Honestly, I think they ought to probably back it up a little bit. Although, let's see, November 9th, I mean, the majority, everybody's going to be done playing by next weekend, unless you're in the playoffs, or, the bowl teams will still be practicing. So I guess that is a good time for it. I'd say, I would be in favor of even backing that up a little bit, maybe to a little later in December, first part of the year. That said, as I'm thinking about my answer, you do have to allow for a transfer to be able to get in school. So it probably does make sense to have it right now, but then, after spring practice, and then I think I would cut it off at that point. I'd have a winter or postseason, and then my preseason would be, after spring practice. Then a player really gets a chance to see who's around him, what his competitions looks like. Coaches have a chance to evaluate where they fit. They can have, real, honest, frank discussions, and players will make a decision based on what's best for them and their opportunity to compete for playing time.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And yeah, definitely getting them after all the games are done would make more sense to me. But
yeah, and I agree with that. The issue is, when does school start? It's not a matter of just saying, they've got to be able to get that player, eligible. Make sure they have the transferable credits. They've got to be able to get them into a degree program at that university. Housing. There's a lot of steps that go. That have to take place. A lot of boxes to check before before that kid shows up on campus.
Yeah, I guess it is a little bit of a moving target, I suppose. So I figured we'd start off with the top 10. And, I saw the one that you sent, and
Yeah.
I'm not that far off from yours, really. I
Yeah.
did have
And
some.
again, mine's that's the cool thing about us comparing ours, because what I put out, what I sent to you is just strictly, for anybody that's watching us for the first time, mine is strictly based on a set of statistical parameters that I look at and that I kind of total up, and there's no eye test to mine, and it's a body of work of everything that they've done the entire season. But you can definitely see where some teams are kind of moving up, some teams move down. I guess I'll kick it back over to you, so I'll let you lead on that.
Yeah, so I ended up having the Vikings as my big mover.
Yes.
I didn't have the Chiefs drop as far as you did, and it's not even necessarily that they're passing the eye test, because let's be honest, on offense they're still kind of not. Like they're playing significantly better than they were, but they're not like, if you put KC against every team on here, they're going to struggle against every team on here. Now they may win.
And that's the thing with them that's been, look, Pat Mahomes is he's the cheat code, right? I mean,
for sure.
If they didn't have him, what would the offensive production look like? And look, in fairness, we can say that about any of those teams up there, but
of course. You could also make the comparison. How good would these other teams be if they had Mahomes?
If they had Mahomes, exactly. But it's I just watch them, and it's like they're winning, but man, it seems like they're winning ugly every week, and they're doing enough to win the games. That's ultimately all that matters. But I just, what's this going to look like a month from now? That's the big question.
And I can even kind of stomach the squeaking by the Raiders, right? Divisional game, you throw the numbers out because divisional games are always crazy, right?
Right.
Squeaking by the Panthers, on the other hand, not a great look, because they don't play football well.
No.
So,
but they looked good. They looked good last week.
They sure did.
and again, I've got them last statistically, but I think that's a team that's inching forward. I think, if you're a Carolina fan, God bless you. You've got to be incredibly frustrated, and you have to be extremely loyal to have stuck with them through the last 3, 4, 5 years. But if you really look at it critically, they are, in my opinion, they are getting better. They seem to be, they're inching forward. Quarterback plays is definitely improved, and that's a big deal. So I think you got to give that staff some credit. They're hanging in there. I mean, they played very hard in that game. There was no let up, and they competed to the very end.
Absolutely. So we do have your guest in the house.
Awesome.
So introduce your guy.
All right. We've got NFL legend with us today, Shayne Graham. I don't even know how many years Shayne kicked in the National Football League. I think it was probably somewhere close to 15. Made his way around to probably half the teams in the league. was elected to at least two Pro Bowls. I think he was a second team All Pro in 2005. When he decided to retire and announced that he wanted to go into coaching, um, I made a call to him and offered him a position at Central Michigan. So I got a chance to reunite with him. He's a guy that, I worked Shane out at Virginia Tech when he was coming out. So we've kind of remained close. And I think really over the last probably 6-7 years, we've been very close. I consider him a very good friend. He has, since stepping away from coaching, he's kind of gone into a private business. He's the CEO, president, owner of Elite Winning Solutions. So he works with a lot of high school and college specialists around the country. He does some consulting work with different staffs. I'll let him talk about that, but it's a pleasure and honor to have Shayne Graham on the show today.
Thanks for having me, guys.
What's up, Shane?
How are you guys doing?
We're doing great.
Awesome.
Excellent. See, and I like what you were coming to the show with. That you brought the whole carafe of coffee. I'm with it. I like it.
That's right. Always be prepared. Don't get ready. Stay ready.
That's right.
That's right. So, I mean, I guess we should head it off with what is Elite Training Solutions? And of course, if you're watching, that is in the comments there.
So, obviously, my background being in kicking, I do a lot of work with high school, college, even free agent, even some veteran NFL guys with the absolutes of kicking with technique and making them the best version of themselves. Obviously, everyone's body's a little different. Everyone's technique is going to vary. There's no cookie cutter right way. But, trying to work with all these guys, understanding some of the biomechanics of the efficient movements of the body. But my big thing is also working on the mental preparedness and mental toughness that has to accompany that physical ability and physical skill, because no amount of ability or talent can outweigh what your mindset is at the time of especially duress. But it's something that I did it with the guys that I coached. I didn't always have control outside of a little bit of recruiting as to who I coached. It was just whoever was on the team, I worked with them. Some teams a little more gifted in that department as to the personnel. University of Florida, I had Evan McPherson, who's done a great job with the Bengals in his career. His rookie year was mind-blowing. Working with him, giving him the tools for his head, I think was the advantage that brought him when he got into the NFL. He heard me talk about all of the things I did right, but more importantly, he heard me talk about all the things I did wrong. And I think that's really like what really helped him kind of understand what his journey was going to be and what ups and downs he may go through. And I think even right now, he's not having his best year. So hopefully he's a little prepared for that, because you got to understand things don't always go your way. And other guys at other teams, relationships with every player I ever coached with every team, to this day, we still text. I mean, I've got 2 or 3 guys in Australia that I still text with all the time, and just see those guys as if they're my children or brothers or family, however. But now that I'm able to kind of branch out, I can have my hands on a lot more guys and try to give influence to many more people, so that the specialty world can have a little bit more of my experience thrown out there. And honestly, it's because of that, not because of me, but because of guys like me, that you're seeing this exponential growth in kicker talent over the last few years. Not only the physical ability and strength of higher quality athletes that aren't just kids coming off the soccer field, but you're seeing guys that are being taught in generational gains from, me being taught from guys that played in the 80s and early 90s to 20, 30 years beyond that, we're now passing it down. So I think that has a lot to do with it. And also I enjoy consulting with a lot of high schools and colleges on their actual special team stuff. So that's really cool for me too, because it gives me a chance to still have my hands in the X's and O's versus just the kicking part.
And from a technology standpoint, Shayne, Shayne's also using, a lot of the some of the stuff that we see on TV. Shayne, I forget the name of your toy.
It's TrackMan, and trust me.
Yeah, the stuff they use for the golfers and stuff. Shayne's got that hooked up where they can now use it with kickers and punters, and he's able to get instant, rates. He can tell you how good that a field goal would have been good from the rotation on the ball, the elevation of the ball. It is next level stuff, and it's an amazing evaluation tool. And
it really is, yeah.
And Shayne's done a lot of work with that in terms of being able to provide not only the players feedback, but also, coaches that might be looking at some of his athletes.
Yeah, no, I mean, having that data obviously would be huge, right? As a kicker, I mean, any player really. Like, I would imagine you can probably incorporate that as a quarterback as well.
I think they're working on the technology to track the spiral. The end over end rotation is really how the radar is able to deflect off the ball for them to get the data and spin rates and trajectory and lateral movement, apex, all the things that they're able to do. But it really is a cool tool. Now, I've also innovated a way to scale the data into a score that can give you a rating, like a comparative analysis type thing. But outside of that, I'll say one of the bigger things that it's good for is, just for example, the Falcons kicker, Koo. So I worked with him on it. And over time, he's found when I swing a little faster, when the ball's going a little faster, I start to lose a little bit of my toward. I've got the yonder, but not the toward. Okay, so if you're from the South, you know what that means. But he found that his accuracy faltered the higher his ball speed was. So while the average in the NFL might be 72 point something miles per hour off the foot, his sweet spot is 68, which helps him find his tempo and his approach, helps him find that comfort zone in his mind that I'm going to be doing things at a certain rate, and I'm not going to change it when I back up. I'm not going to change it when I scoot up. Everything is trying to be consistent. And I know if I really go after it and I get that 72, 73 mile an hour ball, I might start to waver a little bit off of dead center. So that was a really cool tool and a really cool conversation to have when guys can kind of see data versus just saying, oh, I'm not as accurate when I swing harder. Well, we all know that. But there's also that what is swinging for the fences and what is being aggressive and what is controlled aggression. And I think that's really what I'm looking to do is help someone find that controlled aggression so they're not too passive, but also let's not go to the home run derby. Let's try to be a consistent base runner here with ball contact.
No, that makes sense. It's funny because you bring up Koo, and we're looking at this season where a lot of the guys that are generally incredibly accurate are all kind of in rough seasons.
Yeah.
And so, as somebody that tracks that data, all the time, I guess, is the best way to say that. Do you see something from the outside mechanically, or is it just one of those mental games where misses kind of create some misses?
Well, the first thing you have to understand is we're human. We're not machines. We can't just turn an on-off button and perform flawlessly. there's so many variables that come into play. I mean, you've got to make your hay while you can during the good weather. September, October, November starts to get a little iffy. We'll see what December gives, but that's usually when you see touchback rates go down. That's usually when you see the average field goal distance start to drop down a little bit, maybe from 36 to 33 or whatever those numbers may be. But when you miss, you have to, find a way to reset and execute versus thinking correct. You don't correct in a game. You only reset and execute. It's a little bit different than a position player who may have executed the wrong technique or the wrong assignment, because then you have to correct it. But as a kicker, you don't correct it. You reset and execute. And that is the main thing that you have to learn how to do, is to not let something that's in the past affect your moment. And that's also one of the things I talk about, is outside of our pride, outside of our personal life, outside of what has happened in the past, we absolutely cannot let future play into our moment either, because that's when you deal with the fear of repeating the past or any fear of failure. And that's the whole thing that you have to do. And you just never know how the mind is going to react, how they're feeling about, a family member may be sick. They may have problems, domestically at home. They may have a sick child. They may have gone through some kind of loss that more than likely we'll never know about. And you don't know how that plays into it, especially when you add in the factors of your own ego. You add in the factors of your past performances or past miss, and all that wants to get together in about 20 different gears rolling in your head to try to keep you on the train track when your mind's doing this.
It's interesting, along with, to kind of dovetail off of Bo's question, this year we've seen a huge increase in number of long, 50 plus yard field goals attempted and made. I mean, what's your take on that, Shane? I mean, is it just, we got a group of guys that have got, I mean, look, for a guy like yourself, who I think your long was 54. I know you could have hit from 60 plus. It's just, I know it's crazy to me because of the field goal, the field position that you're giving up if you don't make that kick, right? It's one thing to take, a poke at one at the end of the half or end of game, obviously when you need it, but that's not the case. I mean, we're rolling out and, kicking 55. Yeah, it's crazy. What's your thoughts on that?
So I think it's a combination of a lot of things. I think when you throw in the fact that analytics has become such a thing, taking risks with your offensive play calling on fourth down, I think that plays into it a little bit, because if you realize you have that weapon and it's a fourth and long, you're saying, you know what? Let's take a chance, because if we go for it on fourth down, that's a risk as well. So let's just see if, our guy's been doing it in practice. Let's give him a chance. I think that's a little bit of it. I think that added with these guys are just a different breed of athlete. And I think it's taken some time where I think coaches have been a little desensitized to the bad field position. And I say that because we all thought they were going to try to put everything in the corners or low or whatever with this new kickoff rule. Most coaches just said, screw it, let's just kick it out of the end zone, give them the ball at the 30. Yeah. Imagine yourself 15 years ago, coach, deciding to give the ball to the other team on the 30-yard.
No, I mean, your goal was inside the 20, and a return to the 30 was a big play, or it was considered. That was you've done a really good job as a special teams coordinator if you can get the ball, scheme something up and get it blocked up and execute and get the ball consistently to the 30-yard line, you are going to lead the league. I mean, I think Bo and I had this conversation the other day too. We're talking about the punters, right? To me, the kickers are about 5 to 10 years behind where the punters have been, because I know I don't, I think there were some great punters when I came in the NFL in 1999, but I don't know how many of those guys in this day and age, just comparing the numbers, could win jobs now. I mean, I told Bo, I said, a 5-second hang time was something that when you saw that happen in a game, it was rare, right? And now it's like the standard. 15 years ago, if you had a 38-yard net punt average, you were going to be in the top 5 statistically. Yeah. And now you're 38. That's probably going to get you cut, right? I mean, and I think that the athletes are, the training obviously plays into it, but we're getting guys that are just, they're bigger, they're longer, they're more powerful, they're able to, the leg speeds. And then, from a technique standpoint, gosh, in 99, 2000, no one was using the Aussie end over end kick.
Now, Bennett was the first one to bring that. Yeah. And I think that's what caused the net to start creeping up, was everybody started adapting.
Yeah, because the touchbacks went down, which, in the NFL, a touchback comes off of your net. So it's the equivalent of giving up, a 20-yard return, statistically.
But that's why they got so good at the coffin corner.
Right. But we see even high school kids now have mastered the end over end Aussie kick. And that part of the game's really, really come a long way. And I think, maybe the kickers are starting, they're starting to catch up, because let's face it, in the last 5 years, there's a lot of young, it's a whole generation of younger kickers that are in the league right now.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think about, my glory days, and when I was number 1 all-time accuracy, and then I was number 2, and then at some point, like I more guys kept getting added on, and I was number 3, number 4. I don't even know if I'm in the top 20 anymore, because these guys are just, every year there's 2 or 3 guys that hit their 100th field goal to qualify for that.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I just remember as a special teams coach, you guys kind of, when y'all met up at the combine and you had everybody kind of puffing their chest when y'all would see each other.
Yep.
What was it, the Dallas Morning Star that gave those stats that kind of told everybody?
Rich Goslin from the Dallas Morning News. He still does it.
So that inside the 20, that yards on the return, like those things were big, and all of a sudden, that's what I meant. I think we're kind of being desensitized to that a little bit. So coaches are willing to take that risk on field goals. But, to that point with the punters, yes, they probably started being bigger, more athletic before you saw the bigger athletic kickers. Because I think the tendency might have been to be a punter if you were long and big. Mm-hmm. And the kickers were always typically still around that, 5'7", 5'8" Grammatica to, all of a sudden you got your Joe Nedneys and your 6'4" guys. And I was around average to maybe, I don't know. I mean, I was 6 foot 200. So I was right around that, like.
You're the prototype. You're the prototypical size.
Yeah. Well,
I did a study. I did a lot of studies on that over the years in draft prep, in terms of like just, you do it with every position, right? But who are the guys that have been most successful, who's had the longest careers, and then you kind of put them in one pot, and all right, what are the common traits, if you, but and there's always outliers, I mean, look, Cairo Santos has had a very good career. You know, a lot of people thought he would be too small, maybe coming out of Tulane would be more injury prone, but you know, he's played through it. And then you had the other end of the spectrum where you had guys that are really tall and maybe worried that they wouldn't be, you know, the levers were too long to be a consistent ball striker and all those things. But
Yeah.
I would say you were about the prototype.
Well, that was until I retired. Then the dimensions changed. Although I will say I'm down 40 pounds right now from 3 months ago. So
Good for you.
Nice. Sorry, I'm fighting through a little bit of a cold. My wife wanted to share, and
well, that was nice of her. I just fought off an eye infection, so we've all got a little something going on, I guess.
I feel like we're kind of desensitized across the league, not even position related, really. When you think of all the camps, right? You got the quarterback camps. Kids are getting 10,000 snaps by the time they get to, high school, college. I think back to a 4.3 40 was next level elite, right? There was 1.42 ever. And now you got 4 or 5 guys every combine that is a 4.3 and 1 or 2 that play with that 4.2 mark. So, I mean, it's interesting to see the evolution of, just the athletes in general.
Well, I think a lot of that is the specialization of the training, the nutrition, all of that stuff. I mean, the recovery aspect with it, it's, that's kind of the new thing that everybody's investing money in is not the recovery, facilities and the cryo chambers, the relaxation tanks and all that stuff. We're seeing a different level of athlete.
And then you take, for example, all the gurus out there, right? I mean, I'm a guru per se. I'm the kicking, punting, whatever. And there are so many of me out there. And as I've learned, some of them, I'll just leave it at that. There's a lot of us out there. But, almost every guy who goes through college and thinks they have a shot in the NFL ends up trying to do this. Even if they find another career, there are just so many. And then you got to think about the quarterbacks. If you played major P5 quarterback as a starter and you don't make it in the NFL, more than likely you're probably going to start trying to do a passing camp or some sort of, quarterback lesson school. And that's no knock on anyone. I did it. It took me almost 2 years to make it in the NFL. In fact, I was doing lessons. I was a substitute teacher. I worked at a car dealership, at a detail shop. I did all kinds of stuff. Coach Bono was one of the only coaches that really called me my first year out. They kept me from giving up. I didn't get signed with him, but that's my story I always tell is I was ready to just try to figure out life. And I got a workout to go to Jacksonville. Didn't get the job, but had a good workout. And it kind of renewed me a little bit to say, like, hey, I can still do this. Because there were a couple veterans there that had played for years. And I was like, I know I can do this. Like, it's just a matter of timing. And instead of, having the kickoff specialist fill in for the guy who hurt his back, I was hoping I would get signed. But they said, all right, we'll let Steve Lindsay do the field goals until Mike gets healthy. And if something changes, we'll let you know. But that was enough for me. But I think all of us out there, some of us have better credentials than others. And credentials don't always mean you're a good or bad coach. There's just so many that even the bad coaches are probably still elevating you a little bit, if not, as good as some other coaches are. And then you've got the guys out there that charge $1 gazillion, for their lessons and their camps and all that stuff. So, you're seeing a lot of that position-wide all over every position, but it's really big in the kicking world. I have high schools that I go work with 6 specialists at a high school. And to me, that's ridiculous because some colleges don't have that many.
Yep.
Some have too many, by the way.
Yeah, so we do got a couple people popping in here. One, Rob, he says, happy early birthday to you, and that he used to carry you on his fantasy team.
Well, thank you, and I hope I helped his team out. There were a couple years that I know my numbers were up there, but that's always cool to know.
Yeah, I mean that's got to be unique as a player, having people kind of either side, right? Like it can either be good or bad, right? They can be either like, you're killing it on my fantasy team, or they're like, you are killing my fantasy team.
Hey, it's the same way as, hey, don't worry about waiting in line. Come on in. We got a table for you. Or, hey, get the heck out of here. You're garbage. Like there's two sides to every coin. And 85.5% of the time it was a good side of the coin, but that other 14.5 was not so good.
Yep. Yeah, I imagine that was a week-to-week situation.
It could be, and we all go on streaks and things are great, and then it just takes one bad moment, and the fickleness of fans, they love to love you, but they love to hate you even more. And that was one thing I learned, that I can't be so concerned about what people think about me. So I kind of came up with this mantra of, if you don't pay my bills, I don't care what your opinion is.
That's the thing that's unique about kickers, is that, even more so than punters, right? Is that everyone in the stadium knows whether or not you did your job or not. I mean, it's like it's yes or no. I mean, like, and I always felt that way when you had a young specialist. It's, punting in the National Football League is very hard, but there's a level of, like we know what we were trying to do on a particular punt with the ball, whether we're trying to go right or left, or, what type of punt, that sort of thing. But, most of the fans don't. And, as long as the ball is not shanked, right, they don't, it's more forgiving, right? The punter's mistakes, unless they're egregious, they're not out there as much for everybody to see. Where, then I used to say that the 90-year-old grandmother that's sitting up in the nosebleed seats, she can tell you, he missed the kick, So it's I think there's a lot more, because of that. I think your kickers have to be amongst the most mentally tough people as a group as there is in sports, because you don't know, you have to be ready the whole time. You don't know how many opportunities you're going to get or when they're going to actually come. Shane mentioned the cold weather games, right? It's not just the temperature and the air. It's being on the sideline and trying to stay warm for 20 minutes in between your reps, right? And then you gotta go out there. You get one shot, and it's gotta be everything's gotta be perfect. And Shane can tell you it doesn't take much. I mean, you miss by that much, and the ball's not going to go or where you want it to go or fly the way you want it to fly. It's an incredibly difficult and maybe underappreciated skill.
For sure. Well, and I mean, obviously they also, like you said, have the least amount of reps, right? So like if we blow a coverage on defense, you miss something, you got 30 more snaps that people are going to forget about it, unless it was just something completely egregious and you give up a touchdown or something, right? But when it's a kicker, it may be the one shot they had all day.
Yeah.
I mean, look at that Ohio State game this past weekend.
Yeah. It was a rough game.
Well, and that's the thing is be a goldfish, right? Like have a very short memory. I unfortunately, probably one of my gifts in life is that I have a good memory, but also I had to learn how to stay out of my thoughts.
Mhm.
And so for me, in order to be mentally tough, yes, I could handle criticism. I could handle a coach calling me crazy names. Um, I worked with Scott O'Brien, who I thought is a great coach, but he was a very tough coach to play for. I think he calloused my emotions so much when I had him so early in my career that it really helped me handle kind of the vernacular of the coaching world that you might hear that I probably can't even repeat on the air right now. And I ended up playing for him, I think eight 8 or 9 years later in New England, and he said, "Well, I already know you're mentally tough because you've already dealt with me before." So,
I mean, at least he knew.
yeah, and and part of that is really like, how do you hyper focus your process so that you make it so ironclad, and you have sub processes for when something goes wrong. I go to process B, I go to process C, and you try to evaluate every possible scenario and you go through it. Jogging off the sideline in the perfect scenario, I took 37 steps before I got ready for my PAT. Okay, what if it was an interception on the last play of the half with 7 seconds left? You don't have time to kick in the net. You don't have time to see what's going to happen on the next down. It's field goal team. You're out there right now. No warm up. What was my process for that situation? What did I do during a timeout? What did I do during a TV timeout? What did I do here, there, instant reviews? Like, there's so many scenarios that you have to rehearse. And that is exactly what coaches are always trying to do with their entire team, is rehearse these situational things. And for me, I just always felt like if I do it and I go through it, I have a Rolodex of processes that I go through. And I hyper focus on that process where I have music in my head. I have checklists and things that I'm mentally going through that I don't have time to think about the bad rep before. I don't have time to think about the fear of the failure in front of me. Um, and 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 that's ultimately the goal. But as you know, as coach can tell you, getting 11 guys to do that at the same time, their backups to be ready just in case they have to plug and play, and then their backups, is not an easy task. So my job is, you know what? I'm going to know every situation as much as I can. I'm going to spend as much time with my coach in his office going over everything, being grilled, quizzed, whatever. Take as many notes as I can so that if I can help somebody on that 11 or help somebody that's got to come in and fill a role, then I'll be able to tell them something and remind them of their assignment. But also, I know I'm not going to screw it up. So I can at least make sure I'm not the weakest link, but also try to make sure that somebody else gets a little bit of an extra TIG weld on their link as well.
No, that makes sense. And that actually leads into this question we have for you. That what goes through your mind when you have game on the line, big moment, national TV? Like, I mean, it sounded like your setup, you kind of had that worked out regardless of the situation, but
TV played no role. It was cool to get the TV copy after the game. It was cool to have friends and family say, "Hey, I saw you on TV." But I don't know, unless you're a receiver or a defensive back or a D lineman that gets a sack, I don't know that I even play any awareness into a TV. In fact, the only thing a national TV game meant to me was get the damn camera out from behind the net, that cart that goes back and forth, got in the way. That was the only thing that made me even acknowledge that it was a big TV game. As far as game on the line, I use this analogy all the time when I talk to my students. If I took a steel construction beam, let's say it's 8 or 10 inches wide, and I sat it down on the pavement, and I said, I want you to balance and walk across that beam. All of us could very easily do it, right?
Yep.
Like we could probably spin, do a cartwheel, who knows? But we know what our task is: left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot. Like it's easy. You put that same beam 100 feet in the air, and it completely changes everything except for the task. And just having to realize, like, no, I'm not going to go walking on a 100-foot beam just to prove a point that the task is the same task, because I'm not stupid. But essentially, that is practice. That is summer training. That is all the things that we just take for granted, and we just go through the motion. But all of a sudden, in the game, you're 100 feet in the air, and your life's on the line. And that's the way that you do it. Is you don't see it. You don't see the repercussions of what's below the beam. You see the surface of the beam as your moment, and you have to stay focused on your task. And that task in the first quarter versus the task with 5 seconds left, there's nothing physical that changes. And the whole challenge of performance sports is to not change the physical approach to a duress situation. And that is why I think kickers have it really hard. Is that's why Adam Vinatieri, for so long, his percentages in his career are not in the top. Like he doesn't really rank up there in the super top bunch of guys, but he's known for making so many big time clutch kicks that he was fortunate to have the team to get him there, the opportunities for it to happen, but most importantly, to make them. And that's why he's a legend, and why I think he should be a first ballot Hall of Famer. But it's just a matter of, how does your brain function? Does it panic? Do you flinch? Like, can you program yourself not to flinch?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. He should be a first ballot Hall of Famer, no question, because he's the points leader in the league, right?
I mean, you play till you're 45, and that's known to happen, and for good teams that scored a lot of points.
Yep. Yeah, but you don't want to play for the good teams, because then you're only getting 1 point at a time, right? Like, you want to be that average team that gets you to the 30.
No, I bet if you look at the stats, you look at the kickers that score the most points and kick the most field goals, it still takes a productive offense to get you in field goal range.
Oh, for sure.
So my best seasons were on teams that had high-powered offenses.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Yeah, bad offenses punt.
Yeah.
Oh no, you don't want them to be bad, but you don't want them to be so efficient they actually score, right? Like, you want them to get to the 30 and then need a field goal.
Yeah. I mean, I think the season I had the most PATs, I also had over 30 some field goals. And, and that was because our offense, along with our defense, giving us field position, all of those things, good special teams, no help of my touchback rate, by the way. It was really our coverage that had to do that part.
Yeah.
But, that's also the reason that these guys are doing so well and scoring so many points, and the field goal totals are going up, not just because there's an extra game on the year, but, I mean, you think about the role of a punter now versus the role of a kicker. A punter is probably a 40 to 45% punter and a 55 to 60% holder. That means their job is more than half responsible for holding versus the punting, because teams are punting a little less, analytics, kickers kicking from further back. So instead of punting, they're kicking field goals. So you're seeing a lot more of that. And that's probably affecting a little bit of their net as well, is that when the kickers back up, it's less chance for that short field punt, that they're only going to get, 37 out of 38 yards of efficiency if they down it at the 1. Well, that's still going to hurt your average, because it's only 37 yards, right? Well, now we're kicking a field goal at that yard line, or whatever yard line it might be. So those punters, and that's why I teach my guys, hey, you better figure out this holding thing. Like, this is important. This is going to be a big part of your job.
Yeah, with this new kickoff rule, and the touchbacks going to the 30, I mean, like, obviously I track all of this stuff. I watch all of it, to have a kickoff coverage tackle inside the 20 now, it's like the return team has to make a mistake. It's almost, you have to, the ball is mishandled, or there's a penalty on the play. Otherwise, a bad return is at least coming out to the 25. I mean, you don't block anybody. It's hard if you don't even block anybody, the ball's coming out to the 25. And then, the average on the returns is right about where the touchback line is, 30-yard line. And then, but we have seen more scores. And I think that kind of, in a way, plays in what Sean's saying, what Shayne's saying, that plays into some of those longer field goal attempts. That's shifted. It's almost like we're playing on a shorter field now, because the starting field position is improved for everybody across the board. So it's
funny because you're seeing some of those obvious punting situations also become not somehow,
right,
where there's a lot of fourth down plays that are happening on the negative side of the field, which is wild. Like we watched one 2 weeks ago. They went for it on fourth down from the 25, their own 25, in the middle of the game. So like it wasn't even like they were, down, final drive, have to go for it. This was just like, it seems like a good time to tear off a 4th and 8 on my side of the field. Here's hoping it works. It's so some of the play calling is unique from, all the years that we've watched football.
Absolutely.
I think we had a question on there about Steve-O had a question there, Bo, about
did I miss one from Steve-O?
Best kick or something like that.
Oh, yeah. So I think that was Rob.
Okay.
Where'd we go?
Yep.
Here we go. Do you have one kick you made in a game that is your favorite?
Okay, I have a few. So my first ever NFL field goal, December 9th, 2001, 20 yards left hash on my birthday, first ever field goal in Buffalo against Carolina. So I remember that. Honestly, I kind of remember almost every field goal I've ever kicked, to be honest. But I would say the next one would be my first game winner, 36-yarder right hash into the open end of the stadium in Cincinnati against Miami on a Sunday night game in 2004.
And that would have been that was in the sandbox, right? In 2004?
No, that was in Cincinnati.
Okay.
Yeah.
But did they have the turf down then yet? Or
just put the turf down that year.
All right.
Yep.
Only the true hardcore Bengals faithful know that. And then, because all of us that were coaching at that time.
The reason that, and I'll tell you my two other favorites. One was 31-yarder in the Pro Bowl. The other one was two more. Game winner in the playoffs against Philadelphia when I played for the Saints in 2014. And then, or 2013, but it was in January of 2014. And then my other one was 54-yarder in Carolina right after when I played for Atlanta, and they literally worked me out the day after my father passed away. And so that was like it was like the crescendo of my career. When my dad was in hospice, he was saying like, hey, you got to keep working out. I know you can do this. Obviously, I was very fortunate to have that time to spend with my dad. Had I been on a team at that point, I would have missed that last month or two of his life. Yeah. So because I was with him and not on a team, and I still would go train, and then I'd come back to the hospital and spend time with him. Literally the day after he passes away, I get my first workout of the year. And it's Thanksgiving Day weekend. And then I go and have a really good game and finish the season with Atlanta. That one really meant a lot to me. So it's so hard to say like what's my favorite. I mean, I can tell you my least favorite, and two of us in this chat witnessed it. And this was 2002 in Green Bay when I played for Carolina. I had just got signed on Saturday because John Casey had gotten hurt. They brought me in on Saturday and just signed me. We traveled to Green Bay. I see this guy across the field, and we end up driving down. We're down by 3. Rodney Peete gets us down inside the 5, and I miss a 24-yarder wide right. And that was one of the most horrible feelings I ever had. But because of that feeling, I think it really helped spark me and show me that I've been through the worst feeling I can have. I have nothing to be afraid of now.
No, that makes sense. That makes sense. I always find it funny because most players remember the bad plays more than the good plays.
I mean, yeah, but I will say I was able to really remember the good ones better than the bad. Like if someone reminds me, yes, I can recall it. Mm-hmm. And I can even tell you the moments leading up to it and what the grass looked like where I set my spot. Like it's really weird sometimes. But I feel like I learned how to stay more connected to the positive versus the negative. And that is something that I think has helped me in life in general. I mean, I remember when I first started coaching, every single assistant coach and analyst or quality control guy literally complained all morning through night. And I tried to walk as fast as I could with the biggest smile on my face down the hallway every day, every time and I got there really early and I stayed as late as I could. And I just remember like embracing the fact that I knew I wanted to do this. And it was a sacrifice that most people who were financially set probably wouldn't do. And I'm sure that was probably the one thing that coach, when he hired me, was probably like, let's try him out. Let's see if we got this, because it ain't as easy as you might think it is. And I just remember like embracing that and obsessing over learning Visio and obsessing over learning how to use certain aspects of the technology that I was unfamiliar with. And so many guys were like, don't you hate being here? And I'm like, no, I came here during the week. We weren't even supposed to be in the building and came in the back door because I wanted to get all my stencils right for the season or whatever. And they're like, well, why? And I'm like, because this is what I want. I want to focus on this. And they're like, well, it must be because you don't have to worry about money. And I'm like, I'm literally living in a tiny apartment smaller than what you guys are living in, just because I spend all my time in the building. I'm not saying I needed to be humbled, but it was good for me to have that type of feeling. And I made sure that I never showed face when I was not having a good day. I made sure I never showed that. And I think that happened a lot because of what I went through in my playing career.
Well, I was fortunate. I was fortunate to have you, Shayne, and I had no doubt that look, there's always a learning curve when you cross that threshold. But you adapted quickly, and I'm proud of what you're doing. I have one. Do we have time for one more question?
So we're right up against it. Actually, just got to have Shayne tell us where we can find him. And I have to have you back on.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Well, you can find me at elitewinningsolutions.com, and that way you can reach out to me. You can see my services, or Shayne Graham 17 at Twitter, and Shayne_Graham at Instagram.
Perfect. Well, I mean, on behalf of myself and Coach, we're glad you came in. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to like and subscribe. If you're watching on Roku TV, stay tuned for the next hour. Otherwise, we'll see you all next week. Again, thanks a bunch, Shayne.
Thanks, Shayne.
Introducing National Streaming Sports, live and on-demand sports talk programming that you can access 24/7. For the premier sports talk experience, tap into our Roku channel. Start your mornings with Mac and Jack covering all the weekend sports action. Then pour a cup and enjoy all the sports you can drink on the Coffee and Sports podcast. At midday, talk sports from east to west on the Coast to Coast podcast. Followed at night by some hot girl talk with Prim and Proper Sports featuring Sonia Pearson. Talk boxing on the Gloved Fist. Yankee fans tune in for Start Spreading the News. And there's more on the College Sports Huddle and Sports Scope with Robert Butler. There are 20 podcasts in all and 70 weekly shows giving us a 3.4-star viewer rating. To find us on Roku TV, search for National Streaming Sports on the Roku search bar. Click on the logo and you're in. National Streaming Sports, live and on-demand sports talk for America.